Good morning and welcome to Rising. We have a great show for you today. I'm Amber Duke, joined today by Niall Stanage.
Absolutely. Great to see you, Amber. We should probably note to our regular viewers that we are in a slightly different setting than normal. We had technological gremlins in the main studio, but delighted to be with you here nonetheless.
Absolutely. Why don't you read us in on what's going on in the news?
Absolutely. So, at the 100-day mark of the second Trump administration, which is quickly approaching, the White House is moving ahead with the president's agenda. New numbers show, however, that voters may be tiring of it.
A new poll from Fox News shows 55% disapprove of President Trump's job performance, while just 44% approve. That's actually the lowest 100-day approval rating in this century, including Trump's first term when he polled at a 45% approval rating at the 100-day mark. According to the poll, more voters approved of Trump's handling of the border than disapproved, 55% to 40%. But his report card goes downhill from there.
On issues like immigration, guns, foreign policy, and the economy, Trump's approval rating is consistently lower than his disapproval rating. On the president's handling of the economy, a central issue that he ran on and the issue where Trump has consistently polled among the highest, his approval has dipped all the way down to a dismal 38%, while disapproval is at a whopping 56%. Amber, what do you make of all this?
Well, I don't think it's all that surprising. Obviously, the president has been moving incredibly rapidly on a lot of agenda items, some of which are pretty expansive. I mean, the tariff issue is obviously very divisive. That's probably one of the reasons for this low economic approval rating. I think it's fair to say that the stock market crashing after his first announcement of the sweeping tariffs, the reciprocal tariffs, obviously scared a lot of people, and a lot of people are worried about the idea of short-term pain in order to achieve long-term gain. He's since obviously adjusted that policy to a 10% across-the-board tariff, with room for some countries to negotiate, including China, which has much higher tariffs than the rest of the world. But what do you think now? Are you surprised by the economic numbers?
I'm not that surprised, but I do think it is significant. I think that there are a couple of interesting elements to this. First of all, Trump has always been divisive. Now, clearly he got elected last November, and in the Electoral College that was somewhat comfortable. But if you look at polls about him, there's always a very strong number of people dislike him heavily, and the same on the flip side, people who like him. But the issue that animates a lot of the people who just dislike him so strongly is the idea that he's a danger to democracy. And I have made that argument, and lots of other people have made that argument. Many people believe that, but it doesn't really reach completely across the centre ground. And what I think is the danger for him so far as the economy is concerned is that it reaches everybody by its nature, and it raises fundamental questions of competence. So you mentioned the tariff issue. That's really dangerous for Trump because it is very clear and very identifiable that he introduced a policy. The stock market went down rapidly. The bond market, which is admittedly a fairly unsexy topic, but nevertheless proved very volatile. There was a meeting just in recent days where retailers were warning about empty shelves. I think that issue has the capacity to reach a greater number of people to Trump's detriment than the other arguments about democracy and authoritarianism and so forth.
Yeah, I'm curious to see the demographic breakdown in terms of income levels on the economic question. It'd be interesting to know if lower income people, working class people, are generally more approving of Trump's economic message and specifically the tariffs than maybe people who are in higher income groups who rely more on the stock market for returns on their investments versus, the 40+% of Americans who aren't invested in the stock market. But I'm wondering what you think about the Democratic strategy in response to this, because they've been focusing a lot on the immigration question as of late, which is actually where Trump enjoys the most approval. In fact, if you even take Trump out of it, you have 80+% of Americans who support deporting criminal illegal aliens, and even a simple majority who support deporting all illegal aliens, which is obviously something that Trump campaigned pretty heavily on as well. But all of the conversation in the news over the past couple of weeks has sort of drifted away from tariffs and gotten on to this Abrego Garcia case and whether or not Trump effectively gave him due process. Do you think the Democrats are making a mistake by not focusing more on the economy?
I think that in some ways the economy is more fertile ground, and I agree with you that immigration has historically been the topic on which Trump is strongest. But it's really fascinating, Amber, in this Fox News poll, yes, on border security specifically, the president still performs very strongly, 55% approving, 45% disapproving. But on immigration generally, it's an even split, more or less, 47 approve, 48 disapprove. And on deportations, he's slightly underwater, 45% approving and 49% disapproving. That, I think, does suggest that there are a lot of voters who have qualms about the current deportation process, whether people are mistakenly being swept up on that, even though they might favour, broadly speaking, a harder line on the immigration issue. There's a surprising softness in Trump's numbers in that respect. And just finally, Amber, another point about this poll overall. One of the striking things about it is that, getting back to the economy for a second, almost 1 in 5 of people who voted for the president last November are now disapproving on topics like inflation. I do think that's significant because his base is notoriously difficult to shift against him. And there appear to be people who voted for him who have real misgivings about those topics.
That is especially interesting because on inflation and cost of living, those are actually two areas where Trump has been somewhat having achievements on the economy. The inflation rate has come down according to the March jobs numbers and Bureau of Labor Statistics numbers. We've seen the CPI actually decrease for the first time in several years under Trump. So that's pretty interesting. It makes me think that probably a lot of this has to do with media coverage. I understand that there's a study coming out early next week that indicates that media coverage of Trump has been over 90% negative. And that has obviously been even more aggressively so on the specific questions of tariffs and deportations, where a lot of the coverage of the deportations has focused on these several cases where they have admitted to the administrative error in the Abrego Garcia case. And then on the tariffs, you have places like Fox News and the Wall Street Journal, which we'll get into later in the show, which tend to be more pro-corporation, pro-free trade outlets, but are ostensibly center-right or right-wing news outlets. I think it's probably fair to say that breadth of coverage of these issues in such a negative way has probably colored to an extent the feelings of the electorate.
I think that media coverage does colour the feelings of the electorate, and obviously if it is conservative-leaning outlets having coverage that is critical of Trump, that has a capacity to reach people that, MSNBC doesn't or whatever. But I always question how easily or not one can sort of say, well, there's this amount of coverage that is negative, as if it is set up to be that way by the media themselves. If a president imposes a policy, in this case tariffs, and the stock market loses significant value, you're not going to get positive coverage for that. It's like being the coach who loses the Super Bowl. You're not going to get a lot of positive appraisals of your performance. So I think that's part of that debate as well.
All right, we're going to move on. Has Trump just launched a 2028 campaign? Well, he's got the merch for it. That's next.